And these are two ways you can incorporate color into a macrame bag. My name is Nicole and welcome back to Bochinat Macrame. In this pattern tutorial, we will be going over two different ways to incorporate color into a macrame bucket bag project. To make this bucket bag, we do start off with the base of the bag pattern with a bunch of square knot columns all the way around. And then once we have made that start of the base pattern, we then go ahead and make some of the berry knots, which is one way we can incorporate color into a macrame project. As you can see here, we have different colored berry knots, and we do take smaller strands of different colored cords, and we use that as the working cord to make these berry knots instead of using the natural color we have for the base pattern. Once we are done with the bag design part of the pattern, we then close off the bag with some square knots at the bottom. This part is a trickier part of the pattern, so I would recommend watching all the way through to see how that is done. And then to close off the top of the bag pattern, we're making a drawstring strap on both sides so that we can easily tighten or loosen as we need to. We're able to do this because we made some loops at the beginning of the base pattern with some square knot columns, as you can see here, so that you can easily thread through some straps for the drawstring part of the bag. And here is the second part of incorporating color into the project, and we added colorful tassels at the end of each of the drawstring straps. And then finally, to finish off this pattern, we have added crossbody straps so that you can carry this bag across your body. Although this is a small bag pattern, there are some knotting intricacies within it, so make sure you watch through to the end to see how this entire bag is made. And I really hope you will enjoy it and learn some new knotting techniques from it. And with that, let's get started. Before we get into the pattern, you will need some materials and supplies. I used 3mm cotton cord for this pattern, along with some 1.5mm string. You will also need 2 swivel lobster clasps. The cord that I will be using for the base pattern of the bag is a 3mm single strand cord from our foundation cord line. This is made from 100% natural cotton cord, so it is nice and soft. It is also twisted fairly tight so that it is nice and sturdy to work with. For the berry knot pom-poms that I will be adding throughout the pattern, I will be using 2 different colored cords, and these are cappuccino and buttermilk from our rainbow cord line. These are the 2 swivel lobster clasps that I will be using for the bag straps. You can purchase these off Amazon or at your local craft store. And then lastly, you will need some string. This is a 1.5mm 2-ply string in the color natural, and we will be using this primarily for the tassels that we will be adding towards the end. So to get started with the pattern, we're going to take 2 long strands of cord at 210 centimeters long. We're going to fold each of them in half and then mash the loop ends of them together up at the top. Place them side by side together, and then with the far left and far right cords as working cords, we're going to make a square knot up at the top. So take the right cord and weave it over through the left loop on the left side, and then take the left cord through the right loop on the right side, and then pull on the cords to tighten for this first half knot, then make an opposite half knot underneath to finish this first square knot. You have now completed 1 square knot pattern. We're going to make 1 more of these and attach it to the right. So here I've made 1 more square knot column, and then now I'm going to attach it together with the first one we had made with an alternating square knot. So separate out the far left 2 cords and the far right 2 cords, and with the middle 4 cords we're going to make a square knot. To make this a little bit easier to do, you can tape or pin down these 2 knots up at the top on a flat surface or on a cork board or foam board. And now we have attached 2 columns together. We will continue this pattern until we have a total of 26 columns of square knots. So we've made 2, we're going to add 24 more next to these 2 ones, and then attach them all together with alternating square knots. Now here is what the pattern should look like once you have the 26 square knots made, with the second row of alternating square knots attaching them all together. We're now going to add a third row of alternating square knots underneath. Starting underneath the far left 2 square knots, we're going to take the 4 cords in between and make an alternating square knot. Then we're going to continue this pattern to the right. Make 1 more row of square knots underneath for a 4th row. Add 1 last row of alternating square knots underneath, also starting underneath the far left 2 square knots. Once our 5 rows of square knots are complete, we're now going to make a square knot column. Starting underneath the 3rd square knot from the left side, we're going to make 2 more consecutive square knots underneath. So using the far left and far right cords of the 4 cords, we're going to make 2 more square knots. Then on the right side, with the 3rd square knot from the right, we're going to do the same thing. Make 2 more square knots underneath. Then underneath the right 2 square knots, we're going to add 2 more rows of square knots underneath. Start with 1 square knot in between the 2 square knots, and then finish off the last row with 2 square knots underneath. Once you're done this pattern on the right side, we're going to repeat for the exact same pattern on the left side underneath the left 2 square knots. Then in the middle section, there are 3 square knot columns, and we're going to add 2 more rows of square knots here, starting with 2 alternating square knots and then 3 alternating square knots underneath that.
Now take 26 more strands of 210 centimeter long cords and repeat the exact same pattern from start to finish up until this point. Now that you have 2 of these patterns made, we're now going to connect them together. Place them side by side one another and then start connecting them with alternating square knots. After this first square knot is made, we're going to add 2 more rows of alternating square knots underneath. You'll be adding 2 square knots and then 3 square knots after that. Now here on the left side, we're going to take the left 4 cords and make 3 consecutive square knots for another square knot column to form a loop. Then repeat the same pattern with the right 4 cords. Then with the remaining section in the center, we're going to repeat for the pattern similar to what we had done on the other side with 3 rows of square knots, starting with 2 square knots first, then 1 square knot in the second row, and then end with 2 more square knots underneath. Once it's completed, we're going to take the far left and far right sides together in the center and repeat for the exact same pattern that we had just made. Once that is done, we're now going to add a row of square knots all around. So starting between any 2 columns of square knots, we're going to add an alternating square knot, and with every consecutive 4 cords, we're going to make a square knot all the way around the bag. Add 1 more row underneath. The top section of the bag is now completed, and we will now start on the main part of the bag with the pom-pom berry knot design. Ensure to fold the bag so that there are 3 2-column sections at the front. The ones on the sides are the 3-column square knot sections. To make the pom-poms, you will need several strands of 50 centimeter long cords in whatever color you choose to make the berry knots. I'm going to take a strand of 50 centimeter long buttermilk cord, and with the middle 4 cords in the center as anchor cords, we're going to place the buttermilk cord underneath and the 4 cords in the center on top to make a square knot. So take the left and right cord ends of the buttermilk cord and make a half knot, then make 1 more opposite half knot underneath to finish off the first square knot. Then make 2 more consecutive square knots underneath. Now taking the middle 4 anchor cords, we're going to weave them through the hole above the first square knot in the center from top down. Then pull the cords from behind, and using the same working cords, we're going to finish off with 1 more square knot underneath. And we are now complete with our first berry knot. We're going to skip the next section, and with every second section, make a berry knot on this row. Once completed, you should have a total of 13 berry knots all around the bag. And now, in the sections in between each of the berry knots, we're going to fill with a square knot, and then 2 alternating square knots underneath. So we have now made 1 square knot in between 2 berry knots. Then taking the right 2 cords underneath that square knot, and then the 2 cords next to it on the right underneath the berry knot, we're going to make an alternating square knot. Then repeat the same thing to the left. Now repeat this pattern all around the bag. Now underneath, add 2 more rows of alternating square knots. We will now start our second row of berry knots with a different colored cord this time. And we're going to need another 13 strands of 50 centimeter long cords for the working cords of the berry knots. This time we're going to take the 4 cords in between the berry knots from above to make the berry knots. So taking 4 cords in between any 2 berry knots from the first row above, we're going to use those as anchor cords for a berry knot to start off the second row. Then repeating the same pattern as above, we're going to make a berry knot on every second section after this berry knot we had made, for a total of 13 berry knots all around. I've already added the square knots in between these berry knots, so if you haven't done it yet, add those square knots and then add 3 more rows of alternating square knots underneath. Underneath here, we're going to repeat the exact same section as above, starting with the buttermilk berry knot row. Add 3 square knot rows underneath, then the cappuccino colored berry knot row, and then 3 more square knots rows underneath. Add 4 more rows of alternating square knots underneath. Now we're going to find the side of the bag, and by side of the bag I mean the part where we have a 3 square knot column section. Once you have found one of the 3 square knot column sections, we're going to bring that to the bottom and find the middle square knot on the very last row, and then with the square knot next to it to the right, we're going to untie that square knot. And then we're going to do the same thing on the left side and untie that square knot. Then with the next square knot to the right on the right side, we're also going to untie that one, and then also the square knot diagonally to the left upwards. Then do the same thing on the left side. So the next square knot to the left, and then the square knot diagonally upwards to the right. Once you are done untying the square knots, you should have a zigzag-like pattern on the side. Then turn the pattern upside down and repeat the same thing on the other side. The front of the bag pattern is now complete, and we will now turn the bag inside out to seal the bottom of the bag. You will see these stringy cords from the berry knots once you have turned the bag inside out. We will handle that at a later time in the tutorial. But for now, we're going to work on sealing the bottom of the bag first, starting to the left of the upside down triangle. We're going to take the 4 cords from there and make a square knot. Then skipping the next cord down on both sides, we're going to take the next cord on the left and on the right and make another square knot onto the same anchor cords. Now we're going to repeat the same thing to the right of the upside down triangle. And for this next part, this is where we're going to seal the bottom of the bag. Using the same anchor cords, we're going to take the next cord down on both sides and make a square knot. Then we're going to continue skipping the next cord on both sides, and then with the next cord after that, use that as a working cord for another square knot. So skipping these ones, we're going to take the next set of cords on both sides and make another square knot. Now we have started to close the pattern on one end of the bag. Repeat this exact same pattern onto the other end of the bag. Once you have started the square knot row on both sides, we're now going to overlap the anchor cords together, and now for the remainder of the square knots in the center, we're going to have 4 cords in the middle as anchor cords. So starting on any side, we're going to take the next cord down, so skipping one set first, then taking the next cords on both sides for another square knot. Then continue this pattern all the way down to the other side. Once completed, this is what the pattern should look like. Start by cutting off the excess anchor cords from the bottom of the bag pattern. And then taking a 90 centimeter long strand of cord, we're going to use that as an anchor cord for a row of double half-hitch knots all the way around the bottom of the pattern. So starting on any side, we're going to take one vertical cord at a time and attach it onto the anchor cord using a double half-hitch knot. Continue this all the way to the right, through the side, and then all the way back on the left. Finish off the double half-hitch knots with one more double half-hitch knot with the anchor cords. Now you can cut off the excess vertical cords underneath. As for the excess string from the berry knots on the inside, if you want to make them a little bit more secure, you can tie a double overhand knot with each of the cord ends. If not, you can trim them shorter, but you do risk the chance of them sticking out at the front, so I would recommend tying these double overhand knots first before trimming off the excess cords. And then once you're done, you can turn the bag inside out again, and the bucket bag pattern is now almost complete.